phones, Babylons can't crack the code.
The SEC. It is considered by many to be the best conference for college football. And in today's video, I am going to be making my SEC 2022 college football predictions. Now, as usual, before I move on with the video, remember to smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's get into it. The first side of the SEC I will be talking about is the SEC West Division. The first team I'm going to be talking about from the SEC West is Mississippi State. They are coming off a 2021 campaign in which they went 7-6, 4-4 in the SEC. Their offense was 60th in the nation for points scored, averaging 29 points per game, and their defense was 62nd, allowing up to 25.9 points per game. When talking about returning production from the 2021 team to 2022, Mississippi State ranks 21st in the nation out of all the FBS Division I teams, as they returned 78% of their total production from last year's squad, 72% on offense and 84% on defense. In 2022, Mississippi State will play Memphis, Arizona, LSU, Bowling Green, Texas A&M, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, East Tennessee State, and Ole Miss. My predictions for Mississippi State is that they're going to be a pretty solid squad, and I do think they're going to go to a bowl game. I say best case scenario is 8-4, and worst case scenario is 4-8. The next team in the SEC West that I am going to be covering is Auburn. Auburn is coming off a 2021 campaign in which they went 6-7 with a 3-5 conference record. They started off the season pretty good, starting off 6-2, but then they lost out the rest of the season, and they finished 6-7, including a bowl loss to Houston. When talking about their offense and defense last season, their offense averaged 28 points per game and was 68th in the nation, while their defense was one of the better defenses, only allowing 21 points a game and being ranked 27th. When talking about returning production from 2021 to 2022, Auburn ranks 66th, as they were returning 65% of their returning production, 65% on offense, and 65% on defense. Talking about my predictions for Auburn going into 2022, I'm not necessarily the highest on the team. I do think their best case scenario is a 9-3 record, but I do think their worst case scenario is 5-7. I do believe this is a bowl team, but I do need to see a little bit more from Auburn, as I'm kind of skeptical on their quarterback room and their quarterback play overall. The next team I'm going to be talking about from the SEC West is Texas A&M. In 2021, Texas A&M went 8-4, 4-4 in conference, and when talking about their offense and defense, their offense scored 29 points per game, 56th in the nation, but they had one of the top defenses, only allowing 16 points per game, and one of the best ones in the nation, definitely top 10. When talking about returning production from last year's squad to this 2022 team, Texas A&M is 84th in the nation, returning 61% of their production from last year to this year, 62% on offense, and 60% on defense. But it's worth noting that Texas A&M is recruiting the best right now in the country, or at least some of the best. They had the number one class in the class of 2022, and their 2021 class was electric as well. When I think about Texas A&M football in 2022, if their quarterback play is good, they're going to be one of the best teams in the nation. But if it's kind of lackluster, they're going to have an average year, but still have overall a pretty good season. My best case scenario for them is 10-2, and worst case is 7-5. On to the next SEC West team, it is LSU. LSU is coming off quite the disappointing 21 campaign, in which they went 6-7 and 3-5 in conference play. Their offense averaged 26.5 points per game, 80th in the nation, and their defense gave up 26.6 points per game, 70th in the nation. When talking about returning production from last year's squad to this year's squad, LSU is returning the 82nd best amount, 62%. Their offense is returning 54% of their production, and their defense is returning 69% of their production. They are coming in with a fully new coaching staff, Brian Kelly from Notre Dame, and they've been hitting the transfer portal hard, and they did bring in a really good transfer portal class, and I do think they're going to be a little bit better than they were last season. When I think about LSU football going into 2022, I think they have the potential to be a really good team. They do have some really talented players on that LSU squad, And if they put it all together, they could be a top team on the SEC West. I think best case scenario is 9-3 realistically, and worst case scenario that I do not think is going to happen necessarily, but it could happen if things all go south, and that is 6-6. With the next SEC West team, it is Arkansas. Arkansas is coming off a great 2021 season in which they proved everyone wrong. They went 9-4, 4-4 in conference play, and they had some huge wins. Overall, this was a great season for the Razorbacks. When talking about the offense, they averaged 31 points per game, 48th in the nation, and their defense was one of the best in the nation as well, 39th in the nation, 22.9 points allowed per game. When talking about returning production from last year to this year, they ranked 79th, returning 62% of the total production, 65% on offense, and 60% on the defensive side of the ball. Going into 2022, the expectations for Arkansas football are pretty high, especially for what they've been a lot recently, coming off a really good season. Some people are expecting them to make even more noise in 2022. My best case scenario is 10-2, and my worst case scenario is 7-5. I do expect them to be in a bowl game, and they do have a couple really risky out-of-conference games that could really shape up how their season is going to go. Week 1 versus Cincinnati, and one that I think is going to be a really good game and that some people need to pay attention to is October 15th at BYU in Provo, Utah. That BYU team has a potential to be a very good team, and this game could be one of the best. On to the next team, it is Ole Miss. Ole Miss is coming off a good 21 campaign in which they went to a New Year's Six Bowl, went 10-3, and were 6-2 in conference play. Their offense averaged 34 points per game, and their defense gave up 25. The team was very good, and this was one of their best years in school history as of recent. When talking about returning production from last year's team to this year's team, they are some of the lower in the nation, as Ole Miss ranks 97th, 59% total, 49% on offense, and 68% on defense. But it's worth noting, Ole Miss has one of the best, if not the best, transfer portal classes in the nation. When talking about Ole Miss in 2022, they have a lot of hype heading in from last season and the players that they're bringing into this year's squad that can make an immediate impact. People are expecting Ole Miss to be a better team and a much more improved team. I'm thinking they're going to be a pretty good team as well. I think best case is 10-2 and worst case is 7-5. They have a pretty easy non-conference schedule, but as you know, the SEC West is a very tough division. On to the final team from the SEC West that I am going to be talking about. It's a team that doesn't really need much introduction, and that's Alabama. In 2021, they went 13-2, made it to the national title game in which they lost to Georgia. They had one of the best offenses, averaging nearly 40 points a game, and their defense was stout as well, only giving up 20. When talking about returning production from last year's squad to this year, Alabama ranks 65th, returning 65% of their total production, 51 on offense, and 79 on defense. But of course, Alabama, as you know, they don't rebuild, they only reload. Alabama, going into 2022, is not only the SEC favorite, but they're the national title favorites as well. And, well, you know, rightfully so, they are Alabama football at the end of the day. My best case scenario for them is 12-0. Worst case, 11-1. Of course, they have some sneaky games on their schedule. They play on the tougher side of the SEC, in my opinion, in the SEC West. They do have to play at Tennessee and at Arkansas. And of course, week 2, they're playing in Austin, Texas versus the Longhorns, which they should be able to win that game quite easily because they are a lot better than Texas. And that's just my opinion. And, well, they're a team that I do think will win the national title this season. It's Alabama. It's hard for me to doubt Nick Saban. Now that I've gone over the SEC West, I'm going to be talking about the SEC East. The first team I'm going to be talking about from the SEC East is Vanderbilt. They're coming off a 2-10 season in which they had one of the worst offenses and defenses, both ranked outside the 110 range, as their offense averaged 16 points a game and their defense allowed 36 points a game. When talking about returning production, they rank 53rd in the nation, returning 69% total, 70% on offense, 67% on defense. When I'm thinking about best case, worst case scenario for Vanderbilt football in 2022, It's not the best record for them as, well, they are Vanderbilt, but I do think they can win all their non-conference games, and I say best case scenario for Vanderbilt is 3-9, worst case 1-11. The next team of focus from the SEC East is Florida. Florida is coming off a pretty disappointing 21 campaign in which they went 6-7, 2-6 in conference play. Their offense averaged nearly 31 points a game, but their defense gave up nearly 27. When talking about returning production from last year to this year, Florida is 62nd in the nation, returning 65%, 72% on offense, 58% on defense. They do have a whole new coaching staff as they hired Billy Napier from Louisiana, and he is supposed to be a big splash hire for them, and someone that has a lot of expectations to kind of turn Florida football around. When I think of Florida football, in my opinion, for 2022, I kind of have the same feel like I do for them with LSU, is that I think they have all the potential to be a pretty good team in year one of this coaching change, but of course it's going to be tough. I think best case is 9-3, worst case is 6-6. They have a couple rough road games such as at Tennessee and at Texas A&M, and their first game of the season is going to be a true test versus Utah. On to the next SEC East team, it is South Carolina. They are coming off a solid 21 campaign in which they did turn some heads. They went 7-6 overall, 3-5 in conference play. Their offense wasn't very good scoring-wise as they ranked 104th, averaging 22.6 points per game, but their defense was pretty good, only allowing 24, which is 46th in the nation. When talking about returning production from last year's squad to this year's squad, ranks number 37 in the nation, 73% total production returned, 82% on offense, 67% on defense. And they're bringing in a very good transfer portal class, including a new quarterback one, which was a position that they struggled with in 2021. And now they're bringing in my opinion, a top college football quarterback right now in Spencer Rattler. When I think about a best case and worst case scenario for South Carolina in 2022, I think best case is 9-3. Worst case is 6-6. Now, they do have some tough road games in 2022, having to play in some tough environments like Clemson, Florida, Kentucky, and Arkansas. Those are going to be some very tough road matchups for South Carolina, and I do believe they are going to be a much better team in 2022 than 2021. On to the next SEC East team, it is Mizzou. Mizzou in 2021 went 6-7, including a 3-5 conference record. Their offense averaged 29 points a game. However, their defense also allowed nearly 34 points a game, which ranked 113th out of 130 teams. When talking about returning production to this year's roster, they are 68th in the nation, returning 65% of their total roster from last year's squad to this year's squad, 52% on offense, and 78% on defense. My predictions for Mizzou football in 2022, best case scenario is 8-4, worst case scenario is 4-8. I think they have potential to be a pretty decent team in the SEC in 2022, but I also feel like they can be a team that may be bowl ineligible. With the next SEC East team I'm going to be talking about, it is Tennessee. In 2021, it really felt like they were a lot better than their record showed. They went 7-6 and 4-4 in SEC play. They had one of the best offenses in college football, definitely a top 10 one, averaged 39 points per game, and their defense gave up 29 points. When talking about returning production, Tennessee ranks 34th in the nation, returning total 74% of their returning production from last year's squad to this year's squad, 80% on offense, and 68% on defense. Tennessee has a lot of hype heading into 2022, as some think this may be one of their best seasons we've seen from the Volunteers in quite a while. When I think about a best case, worst case scenario for Tennessee football in 2022, I will be admitting to this. I am buying Tennessee hype going in. Now, I'm not buying it fully. I think best case are going to be 10-2, but I do believe worst case are going to be 8-4. With the next SEC East team, it is Kentucky. They're coming off a strong 21 campaign in which they went 10-3, 5-3 in conference play. Their offense averaged 32 points per game, and their defense only allowed 22 points roughly a game. When talking about returning production, Kentucky ranks 63rd, returning a total production of 65%, 59% on offense, and 72% on defense. When talking about Kentucky football heading into 2022, they have a decent amount of hype, as people think they're going to build off the momentum they had last season and have one of their best seasons in school history in 2022. I think a best case scenario for Kentucky in 2022 is a 10-2 record, and worst case is 7-5, and in my opinion, I think they're going to be roughly 9-3 in regular season play. On to the final team that I have in this entire video, and more importantly, the final team from the SEC East. It is Georgia. Georgia is coming off a 14-1 season in which they were the national champions. Their offense averaged 39 points per game and only gave up 10 points per game, and were the best defense in the entire nation. When talking about returning production from last year's squad to this year's squad, they ranked 95th, returning 59% of their total production, 73% on the offensive side of the ball, and 44% on the defensive side of the ball. When talking about Georgia in 2022, I'm expecting them to be in the SEC championship game, and they're my top team in the SEC East. I say best case scenario is 11-1, and the very worst case scenario for Georgia football in 2022, in my opinion, is 9-3. Well guys, if you made it this far in the video, drop something down in the comment section below. What did you think of my predictions, and what conference do you want to see covered next? Now before you head out, remember to smash that like button, turn on those post notifications, and subscribe if you haven't already. Be Helly out.